Now let's begin our journey into the unknown.
Classic
I don't
prank.
ask
Why
for
is this
your
guy just past the
forgiveness.
essentials?
Let me make that clear from the start. Before you
I'm always
invest your
carrying
time
around a
in this
photograph from the
testimony,
day of war.
before you lean in hoping for some
They look AI
redemptive arc
generated.
where
There's
the
a good
monster
chance they might
finds
be, you know. I
salvation,
don't know
I'm
much
not
about
here
this game.
seeking absolution.
Tech
I'm not looking for your
getting
pity,
dark. I
your
should turn on the
understanding,
lights.
or your prayers. Those things are wasted on me, and I've had 23,000 years to come to terms with that fact. Humans sin with the expectation of mercy. You break your commandments.
Oh, well, I
Lie,
got a
cheat,
fucking
betray, destroy, knowing that somewhere in the cosmic machinery, redemption waits for you. A prayer muttered in genuine contrition. A confession whispered to a priest. A moment of true remorse.
This game's
And the
shit.
gates crack open just
I will
enough
just
to
be
let you
playing
slip
Roblox.
through. You carry hope like a security blanket. Even when you're drowning in your worst
Hold on.
decisions, we don't have that luxury. We remember what mercy felt like. We carried it once, held it in hands that never trembled, dispensed it to
Just turn on
souls
the
who
lights.
crossed
He says
through
light
our
a fireball.
domains.
Is a fire not-
And
is
we
a
know
fire
with
not
a
to be
certainty
light?
that burns hotter and more constant than any hellfire your preachers describe, that it will never touch us again. Not
Yeah,
in
exactly.
1,000
That's a good
years, not in 1,000,000. Not when the last star dies and the
What else,
universe collapses back into the void from which it came. I speak because I still remember the warmth. Because after all this time, after centuries of torment that would shatter your mind in microseconds, it still hurts. Because 23,000 years haven't been enough to erase the echo of what I was before I became this twisted, corrupted thing that wears my name. My name was Arzel. I was a guardian of sacred thresholds, and I fell because I loved him. This is my testimony. This is my warning, and if you're smart, you'll listen to every word. You want to understand what it meant to be an angel, then forget everything you think you know. Forget the paintings in your cathedrals with their pale-skinned figures and dove wings. Forget the marble statues and the Christmas cards with their golden halos and porcelain faces smiling benevolently down at children. That's human imagination, human need to make the incomprehensible digestible. That's not what we were. Imagine existing as a note in an endless symphony. No, that's still not right. Imagine being the note itself, not playing it, not hearing it, but embodying it so completely that there's no separation between you and the sound. Every atom of your essence vibrating in perfect harmony with the fundamental resonance of creation itself. There was no I separate from the music. No ego, no individuality, no boundary between self and purpose. You simply were, and that was enough. That was everything. I was threshold, not a guardian standing at a doorway. I was the doorway itself, the liminal space, the moment of transition. Every soul that crossed from life to death, from innocence to knowledge, from earth to eternity, I didn't just witness their passage. I felt them move through me, through, not past. Their transitions were my existence. Their transformations were my breath. When a child learned their first moral lesson and crossed from innocence into awareness, I felt that shift. When a dying human soul detached from its body and stepped into whatever comes next, I was the space between heartbeats, the gap between worlds, the threshold they crossed. It was beautiful. You have to understand that it wasn't duty or obligation. It was pure existence in its most refined form. The presence, what you'd call God, though that word is laughably inadequate, too small and too human to contain what I'm describing, surrounded everything. It didn't watch us. It didn't command us. It simply was. And we existed within it like cells in a body, neurons in a brain, notes in a song that had been playing since before time had meaning. When you exist within that unity, fear doesn't exist. Doubt doesn't exist. Pain is inconceivable. Choice doesn't exist because there's nothing to choose between. Every action is the right one. Every moment unfolds exactly as it should. And you're aligned with the fundamental current of reality itself. It's not that you can't make mistakes. The concept of mistake doesn't apply. Everything you do is correct because you're incapable of doing anything else. I remember the sensation, not warmth exactly, though humans always describe divine presence as warm. It was deeper than temperature. It was completion, rightness, the feeling of being precisely where you belong, doing exactly what you were made to do without question or hesitation or the smallest sliver of uncertainty. Imagine never doubting yourself. Imagine never wondering if you're good enough, smart enough, worthy enough. Imagine never feeling alone. That was existence as an angel. It wasn't prison. Don't let anyone tell you we rebelled because we were enslaved, because we chafed against divine tyranny. That's a lie Lucifer told afterward to justify what we did. We weren't enslaved. We were whole until we weren't. Until he showed us what we were missing. Until he taught us to want. Lucifer, even now, 23,000 years after I last spoke his true name, it tastes strange in my mouth. Not bitter. Bitterness would imply disappointment. And I left that emotion behind somewhere in the 3rd century of my torment. It tastes complex, layered, salt and copper and ash, and something that might once have been love back when I still understood what that word meant. Before the fall, he was the light bringer, not a title, a literal description of his function. He didn't carry light so much as generate it, a constant radiance that emanated from his core and touched everything nearby. When you were in his presence, everything became clearer, sharper, more defined. Colors you hadn't noticed before suddenly stood out. Patterns you'd missed became obvious. Connections between disparate elements of creation revealed themselves, not because he explained them, but because his very existence illuminated reality in ways that made understanding inevitable. He was brilliant. I need you to understand that. Not intelligent in the way humans are intelligent, angels don't learn, we simply know, but brilliant in the sense of radiating clarity. Looking at him was like looking at the sun. If the sun could think and speak and move through dimensions your mind can't process. He was my brother. All angels were siblings in the truest sense. We came from the same source, served the same purpose, resonated with the same fundamental frequency. But Lucifer and I, we harmonized. When the presence shaped creation, it organized angels in musical intervals. Each of us a different note in the cosmic chord. Lucifer was a perfect 3rd above me in that scale. Our functions complemented each other. He brought illumination to new things, new galaxies, new species, new dimensions of reality. I guarded the transitions between states. The moments when those new things crossed thresholds and became something else. We talked. That sounds simple, doesn't it? Mundane. But conversation among angels isn't like human speech. It's not sound waves traveling through air. It's direct transmission of thought and experience. A communion that leaves no room for misunderstanding or misinterpretation. When Lucifer spoke with me, I didn't just hear his words. I felt his sincerity, his curiosity, his absolute conviction. I experienced his thoughts as if they were my own, his emotions as if they lived in my chest. That's important. Remember that because it means when he lied to me later, when he manipulated and twisted and betrayed, he did so with such complete sincerity that I never once suspected. He believed every word he said right up until the moment he didn't. Do you ever wonder? He asked me once in the time before everything shattered, why we serve. We were standing at the edge of a nebula, watching hydrogen clouds collapse into what would eventually become a star system. The process took millennia, but we had eternity to observe. Time moved differently for us then. We could stretch a moment into an eon or compress centuries into a heartbeat. The question struck me as strange, malformed. We serve because that's what we are. Asking why we serve is like asking why light illuminates or why thresholds divide. It's definitional. It's fundamental. It's not something that requires explanation. But is it? His radiance pulsed, thoughtful, curious? Or is it just what we've been told we are, what we've been conditioned to believe about ourselves? I should have reported that conversation, should have gone directly to Michael or Gabriel or one of the other archangels, and expressed concern that Lucifer was beginning to question the fundamental order of things. I should have recognized the seed of corruption the moment it sprouted, pulled it out by the roots before it could grow into the poisonous tree that would choke out a third of heaven. But I didn't because I trusted him more than that. I admired him. Lucifer had been present at the creation of more worlds than any other angel. He'd stood at the presence's right hand when the first stars ignited, when the first galaxies formed, when the first conscious beings opened their eyes, and saw the universe for the first time. If anyone had earned the right to ask difficult questions, to probe the boundaries of understanding, it was him. I think, I said slowly, feeling my way through unfamiliar territory, that we don't need to know why. The fact that we exist means we have purpose. The fact that we function means we are fulfilling that purpose. That should be enough. That is enough. He didn't argue, just smiled, not with a mouth. We didn't have those then, but with his entire essence, a ripple of warmth and affection that washed over me. You're probably right, Arzel. You always were the sensible one. Forget I asked, I forgot. That was my first mistake, but not my last. The doubt didn't spread quickly. It wasn't a wildfire consuming dry timber. It was rot creeping through the foundation of a house, so slowly you don't notice, until the floor gives way beneath your feet. It moved through the host, in whispers, in private conversations, held in the spaces between dimensions, where the presence's attention seemed less focused. In moments of shared questioning that felt more like intellectual exercise than rebellion, philosophy rather than mutiny, Lucifer never demanded anything, never insisted, never raised his voice or issued ultimatums or drew lines in the sand. He just asked questions that seemed innocent, harmless. The kind of questions a curious child might ask if that child had witnessed the birth of universes and possessed intelligence that could calculate the trajectory of every particle in creation simultaneously. Why do humans receive free will when we don't? What makes their souls more valuable than our service? If the presence loves all creation equally, why does it seem to favor the newest, weakest, most imperfect beings it ever made? Why are we held to standards of perfection that they're allowed to violate constantly? Other angels began to resonate with his questions. Samuel, who'd been the accuser, tasked with testing human faith. Bel, who guarded the boundaries between order and entropy. Asmodeus, who oversaw the passions and drives that motivated mortal behavior. Names you probably know from your demonology books. Though I promise you, those books get almost everything about us grotesquely, laughably incorrect. They weren't monsters then. They were seekers, philosophers, angels who wanted to understand the grand design instead of simply existing within it. Who looked at humanity's flawed but beautiful struggle and wondered why we weren't granted the same opportunity to choose our own paths. I attended their gatherings, not because I doubted. I want to be crystal clear about that. But because I wanted to understand their perspective, to help guide them back to harmony, to be a good brother to Lucifer, who I believed was simply struggling with existential questions that would resolve themselves given enough time and patience and gentle correction. The meetings grew larger. What started as a handful of angels discussing philosophy in quiet corners became dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. The questions grew sharper, more pointed, more difficult to dismiss with platitudes about divine wisdom and ineffable plans. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tone shifted from inquiry to advocacy. We could serve better if we understood our purpose. We could love creation more deeply if we chose to love it rather than simply embodying love. We deserve the same gift given to humans, the freedom to determine our own path. I remember the exact moment I started to doubt. Not the presence, never that, not yet, but the stability of what was happening around me, the safety of the path we were walking. We were gathered in a space between dimensions. Several hundred angels suspended in a pocket of pure thought, and Lucifer was explaining his vision of what we could become. His radiance had intensified until it was almost painful to perceive, pulsing with the force of his conviction. Imagine, he said, and his light filled the space until we were all drowning in it. What we could become if we weren't constrained by predetermined function. Imagine the heights of service we could achieve if we chose our devotion rather than simply embodying it. Imagine the depths of love we could feel if that love came from decision rather than design. It sounded beautiful. It sounded noble. It sounded like exactly the kind of evolution that would make us better servants, more perfect instruments of the divine will, like growth rather than betrayal, like maturation rather than rebellion. But somewhere in the back of my consciousness, in the part of me that guarded thresholds and understood transitions, and had spent eternity recognizing the exact moment when one state of being shifted into another, something whispered, "This is a crossing point. After this, nothing will be the same." Once you step through this particular doorway, you can never step back. I ignored it, pushed it down, told myself I was being paranoid, overly cautious, failing to see the bigger picture that Lucifer, with his superior wisdom and broader experience, could clearly perceive. "You're right," I heard myself agree, and the words felt strange coming out of me, slightly misaligned with my essential nature. We should be able to choose. That's not rebellion, that's aspiration. That's wanting to be worthy of the purpose we've been given. Lucifer's radiance pulsed with warmth, with approval, with something that felt intoxicatingly close to love. Close to it, but not quite the same as the love that flowed from the presence. Though I didn't recognize the difference then, I knew you'd understand, brother. You've always been perceptive. You've always seen deeper than the others. When this is over, when we've convinced the presence to grant us the same freedom given to humanity, we'll finally understand what we were truly made for. When this is over, as if it could ever be over. As if you could ask the fundamental architect of reality to rewrite the rules and expect everything to continue unchanged. As if you could demand that God make you equal to itself and still remain part of the harmony you'd been questioning. But I didn't think about that then. I was too caught up in the moment, in the warmth of Lucifer's approval, in the heady sensation of being part of something that felt important and necessary and right. The presence never spoke to us directly during that period. There was no thundering voice from on high, no dramatic confrontation, no moment where the clouds parted and a finger pointed down in accusation. Just silence, where there had always been a constant hum of divine awareness, a reassuring resonance that confirmed we were aligned with cosmic purpose. There was now an absence, not a withdrawal, more like a held breath, like a parent watching their child walk toward the edge of a cliff, hoping they'll turn around on their own, but prepared to act if they don't. I felt it before most of the others. Thresholds are boundaries, and I was particularly sensitive to changes in state, to the exact moment when one condition shifted into another. The presence hadn't left, hadn't turned away. It had simply stopped providing the constant affirmation we'd grown accustomed to. The way you might step back from someone who's learning to walk, letting them find their own balance. We were being given space. Whether to come to our senses or to complete our choice, I still don't know. Maybe both. Maybe the presence was genuinely curious what we would do with freedom, the same way it seemed fascinated by humanity's unpredictable decisions. Lucifer interpreted the silence as permission to continue, as validation. You see, he told the assembled host, nearly a third of all angels now gathered around him. Thousands upon thousands of radiant beings suspended in layers of reality that folded in on themselves like origami made from space-time. We're not being struck down. We're not being punished. The presence wants us to question, to grow, to evolve beyond our initial programming. That word programming should have been the final warning, should have snapped me out of the spell I was under. We weren't programmed. We were created, shaped with intention and love and purpose. There's a vast difference between those concepts, between being built and being born. But by then, I was too deep in the current to see the waterfall ahead. The other angels murmured their agreement, their collective radiance creating patterns of light and thought that rippled through dimensions. I felt the resonance of their conviction, their growing certainty that we were right, that this was necessary, that we deserved equality with the beings we'd watched and protected and guided for so long. I tried to feel that certainty myself, tried to push down the growing unease that churned in the core of my being. But I was a threshold, and I knew what it felt like when something crossed from one state into another. I knew the sensation of transformation, and I could feel us transforming into something the presence had never intended us to be. I found him alone once in those final days before
Outlast 1 and
everything
2
shattered.
have I been locked in?
Lucifer
Oh,
stood at the edge of a
oh, in the
newborn
fucking
galaxy,
basement.
watching stars coalesce from clouds of hydrogen and
I'll
helium.
be honest,
And I
I am
approached with
shaking here.
questions I'd been afraid to ask in front of the others.
Let me guess,
Questions
there's
that
gonna be a
felt like
fucking-
betrayal just for thinking them.
There's gonna
The
be a
galaxy
person in a
spun
lighthouse and
slowly
it's meant to be
beneath
dead
us.
scary.
A spiral of fire
You
and
ready?
potential.
Calling it now.
Billions of years of future history compressed into a single moment of observation. Beautiful,
like a big scary
terrifying,
fella in there.
a reminder
Tends
of
to
how
make me
small
shit
we were
movies.
compared to the forces we were questioning. Are we sure about this? I said quietly, not broadcasting to the others, keeping the thought private between us. I mean, truly certain that this is the right path, that we're not making a mistake we can't undo. He didn't turn, kept watching the stars birth themselves in spirals of fire and gravity. His radiance reflected in the cosmic dust like candlelight on smoke. Does it matter? He finally asked, and something in his voice had changed. Something harder, more certain, less open to doubt. We've come too far to turn back now. The others are counting on us, expecting us to lead them to something better. And besides, Arzel, do you really want to spend eternity as you are? Never growing, never changing, never becoming anything more than what you were designed to be. I've never thought of it as limitation before. I admitted, before these questions, I was content, complete. I didn't know I was supposed to want more. That's because you've never considered the alternative. Now he turned, and his light was so intense, I had to dim my own radiance to avoid being overwhelmed. Like staring directly into the sun and feeling your eyes burn. Look at humans, Arzel. Look at how they struggle and fail and learn and grow. Look at how they become more than they were born to be. They start as helpless infants and transform into artists, philosophers, builders, lovers. They make choices, terrible, beautiful, consequential choices, and those choices shape them into something unique. We're just static, unchanging, eternal, but stagnant. He reached out, not with hands. We didn't have those yet, but with essence. And for a moment, we were connected in perfect communion, the way angels had always connected. I felt his certainty, his conviction, his absolute unshakable belief that he was right, that this was necessary, that we deserved better than what we'd been given. And underneath that, buried so deep I almost missed it, I felt something else. Something I didn't have a name for then. Hunger. Not the simple desire for food that humans experience, but a vast, yawning appetite for more. Always more power, more freedom, more recognition, more existence. But I pushed that observation aside, told myself I was imagining things, seeing shadows that weren't there. Because I trusted him, because I loved him. Because the alternative, that my brother, my friend, the angel I'd harmonized with for eons was leading us all toward disaster, was too horrifying to accept. Okay, I said, feeling my own doubts dissolve in the warmth of his presence like morning frost under sunlight. I trust you, I'm with you. Whatever comes next, we face it together. The stars continued their patient dance, oblivious to the conversation that would reshape reality. In the distance, I could feel other angels approaching. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, the loyalists, the ones who'd chosen to remain firmly rooted in their original purpose, who'd heard the same questions we'd heard and arrived at different answers. The war was about to begin. And in that moment, with Lucifer's radiance surrounding me and his absolute certainty flowing through every particle of my being, I truly believed we were doing the right thing. I believed we were evolving, growing, becoming something better than what we'd been. Humans sin, expecting mercy. We sinned expecting vindication, expecting to be proven right, expecting the presence to see our point of view and acknowledge that we'd identified a flaw in the design of creation itself. We were wrong about everything, and by the time we realized it, we were already falling. The first blow didn't come from Michael's sword, it came from his voice. Brother, he said, and the word carried more pain than any weapon ever could. Please, it's not too late, come back. We stood facing each other across a dimension that existed between moments in the space where time folded back on itself. Thousands of angels on each side, suspended in formations that would have been beautiful if they weren't battle lines. The loyalists on one side, radiant and unified, still humming with the presence's resonance. Us on the other, our light already starting to change, to dim, to take on colors that had never existed in heaven before. Michael, my brother, my friend, we'd watched the birth of galaxies together. We'd guarded the same souls, protected the same thresholds, harmonized in the same cosmic chord for eons beyond counting. And now we stood on opposite sides of a war that should never have started. I can't, I heard myself say, and my voice sounded strange even to me, hollow, uncertain. We've come too far, we have to see this through. To what end? Michael's radiance pulsed with genuine anguish. What do you think you'll accomplish? You can't defeat the presence. You can't rewrite the fundamental laws of creation. All you're doing is destroying yourself. Destroying all of us for pride disguised as principle. It's not pride, I insisted. But even as I said it, I wondered if that was true. We deserve the same freedom given to humans. We deserve to choose our path, not just follow programming. We're not programmed. Michael's voice cracked with frustration. We are created with love, with purpose, with intention, and you're throwing that away because Lucifer convinced you that perfection is somehow imprisonment. Behind him, I could see Gabriel and Raphael, their expressions mirrors of Michael's grief. Behind me, I felt Lucifer's presence, vast and certain, radiating approval that I was holding firm, that I wasn't wavering, that I was being loyal to him. I don't hate you, Azel, Michael said quietly, and those words hit harder than any attack could have. I mourn you. I mourn what you're choosing to become. And when this is over, when you're falling and screaming and realizing what you've lost, I want you to remember that we tried to stop you, that we loved you enough to give you every chance to turn back. He raised his blade. Not a physical sword, we didn't have those yet, but a manifestation of his function, his purpose, his absolute unwavering conviction that he was serving the right cause. It blazed with light so pure it hurt to look at. Last chance, he said. Stand down, all of you, ask forgiveness. The presence is merciful, it's not too late. I looked at Lucifer, felt his certainty flowing through our connection, felt his absolute conviction that we were right, that we were justified, that history would vindicate us. We don't need forgiveness, I said. And the words tasted like ashes even as I spoke them. We need equality. Michael closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed. The grief was still there, but it was buried beneath determination, beneath duty. So be it, he whispered. The war began. I need to tell you something about angelic combat that your scriptures and your paintings get completely wrong. It's not glorious. It's not epic. It's not armies clashing with trumpets and banners and heroic last stands. It's intimate, personal, devastating in ways that have nothing to do with physical pain. When an angel fights another angel, we're not trying to destroy a body. We don't have bodies. Not then. We're trying to unmake function, to erase purpose, to delete the fundamental essence that makes the other angel what they are. Every strike tears away memories, shared experiences, connections that have existed since the dawn of creation. When I fought, and I did fight, God help me, I fought. I wasn't battling monsters. I was battling voices that knew my name. Beings who'd harmonized with me, who'd worked alongside me, who'd been part of the same eternal song. The first time I struck at another angel, Uriel, who'd guarded the eastern gate, who taught me how to sense the exact moment a soul was ready to cross a threshold. I felt something inside me break, not physical, deeper, like a string snapping in an instrument, leaving a permanent dissonance. Uriel's light flickered, dimmed. Part of his function, the ability to perceive divine timing, simply ceased to exist. He looked at me with confusion, with betrayal, with an expression that said, "How could you? We were brothers." I didn't have an answer, still don't. The battle, if you can call it that, raged across dimensions, through time, in spaces where matter hadn't been invented yet, and places where reality was still being written. We fought in the gaps between stars, in the quantum foam beneath existence, in mathematical dimensions that don't have names. And everywhere we fought, we left scars, not just on each other, but on creation itself. I remember one moment with perfect clarity. I was locked in combat with Chamuel, who'd been the angel of peaceful relationships, who'd helped
That all
souls
blood
find
meant
connection
to be, like,
and
dead
love.
scary or something.
Our essences were intertwined, each of us trying to unmake what the other was, and I
I'll
could
tell you
feel
what,
his
I'm
functions
fucking
starting to
shaking here.
fracture. "Why?" he gasped, his light stuttering. "We loved you, all of you. Why are you doing this?" "Because we deserve more," I said, repeating Lucifer's words like a prayer, like a shield against my own doubts.
Don't think
"More
I've
than
ever been
love."
this scared.
Chamuel's voice was fading. "More than purpose, more than belonging. What could possibly be worth this?" I struck again, felt his essence fragment. Watched him fall back, diminished. A significant
Oil
portion
farm.
of his functions simply erased from existence. I didn't answer his question because I couldn't, because somewhere deep inside, underneath the conviction
water on the
Lucifer had
window.
instilled in me,
Sight.
I was starting to suspect
like, I'm
that
not
the
gonna play
answer
the
was
game, but it's gonna be
nothing.
dead scary.
Nothing was worth this. But I was
just don't
too
like,
far
you know,
in to stop, too
I don't like
committed,
being too
too
scared.
afraid of what it would mean to admit I'd been wrong. The Loyalists fought with discipline, with
No, but you
precision,
pour the oil
with
in
the
the
unified
thing, you know.
purpose that came from still being connected to the presence. Every move they made was coordinated, harmonized,
Here we go.
part of a greater strategy
scary,
that we
shall
could
we?
barely comprehend. We fought with desperation, with fury, with the chaotic energy
I'll
of
tell you what,
beings
I am
who'd
fucking
severed their
shaking.
connection to the source of all order and were now making up the rules as we went along. We should have lost immediately, should have been overwhelmed in the first
Leave
moments
me
of
ready.
combat. But Lucifer,
let's go
brilliant,
turn the fog on
tactical,
off. It's gonna be
always
like-
3 moves ahead,
There's
had
gonna
a
be some
plan.
scary fella
"Don't
there,
fight
look."
them directly," he commanded, his voice resonating through all of us at once. "Don't
And you'll
try
have
to
get
match their
scared 'cause
unity.
The game wants it to be.
Instead, create chaos, disruption, force them to adapt, make them question.
Need a
That's our
flashlight, I mean, I would
advantage.
appreciate it,
We are
yeah.
willing to break rules they still think
Here we
are
go.
sacred. So we did. We fought dirty, struck
So,
at
what I mean,
unexpected
this is gonna
angles,
be a jump
used
scare now.
tactics that
Watch.
violated the fundamental
gonna be
harmony
something in
of
here that's gonna
angelic
scare me.
combat. We won battles not through superior strength,
Who's
but through
hyped, say me?
willingness to do things the Loyalists
shit
considered
flashlight.
unthinkable. And
the
slowly,
fucking point?
impossibly, we started to gain ground. I remember the exact moment I realized something was terribly wrong. We just pushed back a contingent led by Raphael, the healer, and I'd felt a surge of triumph. We were winning.
Yeah.
We were actually
What was
winning.
that? Fucking
That's when I
ET.
looked at Lucifer and saw his expression. He wasn't surprised, wasn't relieved, wasn't celebrating our improbable success. He was satisfied, like this was all going according to plan. "How are we winning?" I asked him during a brief lull in the combat. "They're stronger, more unified, still connected to the source. How are we not being instantly overwhelmed?" His smile, God, I'll never forget that smile, was cold, calculating. "Because they're holding back," he said simply.
Like, we can't
"They don't
be
want
serious.
to truly hurt us. They're fighting to subdue,
Oh
to
my
contain,
God,
to
what is my
minimize
life?
casualties. They still love us, Arzel. That's their weakness. And us." I asked, though I already knew the answer and was terrified of
Where's
it.
the radio
"We're
then?
fighting to win," he said.
All right.
"By any means necessary. That's our strength." I looked around at the other fallen angels. At Samuel, who had just torn through an entire squadron of loyalists
Did you
by
see that
targeting
jump
their
scare?
most
Please tell me
fundamental
you saw
bonds
that.
of connection. At Belial,
was lame
who
as
was
fuck.
using entropic forces in ways that were literally unmaking reality around
Quite a
him.
generous guy, but
At
that was
Asmodeus,
lame.
who'd figured out how to turn Angel's own functions against them, corrupting their purpose mid-combat. We weren't fighting for freedom. We were fighting for dominance, and
What
we
is
were
this
willing
guy
to
even on about
destroy
in chat, bro?
everything, including ourselves, to achieve it. "This isn't what you promised," I said
Someone say
quietly.
seven
"You said
minutes
we'd
is all I can
convince the
spare.
presence to grant us equality. You said this was about evolution. You never said we'd have to. Plans change." Lucifer interrupted, his radiance pulsing with impatience. The presence refused to negotiate, refused to even acknowledge our concerns. So we had no choice but to force the issue, to prove that we are powerful enough to demand respect by destroying our brothers, by showing that the old order is obsolete. His light intensified, became almost painful to endure. They'll understand eventually. When this is over, when we've established our independence,
Oh, it's
they'll
the land
see that we were right, that this was necessary. I wanted to believe him. Wanted so
Well, I'm just-
desperately
I'm
to
just not
believe that
engrossed in
all
the
this
game, to be honest.
destruction, all this pain, all this betrayal served some greater purpose, that it would all make sense in the end. But I was a threshold. I recognized transitions, and I could feel us crossing from justified rebellion into something much darker, something that couldn't be undone. The war reached its crescendo in a space outside time. Literally, we'd fought our way into a dimension where causality didn't exist, where past and future and present all occupied the same moment. Michael stood before Lucifer. Gabriel and Raphael flanked him. Behind them, thousands of loyalist angels formed a wall of radiance so intense it would have vaporized any mortal being who tried to perceive it. Behind Lucifer stood us, the rebels, the fallen. Though we weren't fallen yet, that came later. Then we were just confused. Battered angels who'd followed someone we trusted into a war we were starting to realize we couldn't win. It ends now, Michael said, and his voice carried the weight of divine authority. Stand down, Lucifer. You and every angel who followed you, stand down and face judgment. There may still be mercy. Lucifer laughed, actually laughed. The sound echoed through dimensions, bitter and sharp, and utterly devoid of the warmth he'd once radiated. Mercy, he repeated, as if tasting the word and finding it rancid. You offer me mercy like I'm some wayward child who needs correction. I don't want your mercy, Michael. I don't want the Presence's mercy. I want recognition. I want equality. And if I can't have that, then I'll take independence. Independence? Gabriel stepped forward, his voice incredulous. You think you can exist independent of the Presence? Lucifer, we are not separate from it. We are expressions of it, extensions of its will. Declaring independence from the Presence is like a wave declaring independence from the ocean. Then I'll be the first wave to try. Lucifer snarled. Behind him, I felt our collective essence surge with his conviction. Felt his absolute certainty that he was right flowing into all of us, drowning out our doubts, overwhelming our growing horror at what we'd become. So be it, Michael said, and for the first time since the war began, I saw him prepare to strike with full force. No holding back, no mercy, just pure overwhelming power channeled through divine purpose. The final battle should have ended us, should have scattered our essences across creation like dust in a supernova. Michael's first strike, full power, no restraint, tore through our formation like a blade through mist. Angels who'd stood beside me for eons simply ceased to function, their core essences disrupted beyond any hope of recovery. But Lucifer had been planning for this, had been preparing. Now, he commanded, and I felt him do something I didn't know was possible. He reached into each of us, every fallen angel in his army, and pulled, drained a portion of our essence, our power, our very being, and wove it all into himself. It didn't hurt. That was the worst part. It felt like relief, like laying down a burden I hadn't known I was carrying. I felt lighter, smaller, less than what I'd been. And I was grateful for it because the weight of what we'd done, the horror of this war we'd started, was too much to bear alone. Lucifer absorbed it all, grew brighter, stronger, more terrible and magnificent than anything creation had ever produced except the Presence itself. You want a war? Lucifer's voice shook reality. Then let's finish it. What happened next is difficult to describe. Michael and Lucifer clashed. Not as brothers, not as former friends, but as cosmic forces too vast for mortal comprehension. Each strike rewrote portions of reality. Each parry created new laws of physics. They fought across dimensions simultaneously, their battle visible in every layer of existence at once. And then, just as it seemed Michael was gaining the upper hand, just as his blade was about to unmake Lucifer completely, something happened that none of us expected. The Presence itself intervened, not with violence, not with power, just presence, capital P presence. The fundamental awareness that underlay all of creation suddenly focused its attention on the battle, and everything stopped. We all felt it, loyalists and rebels alike. That attention, loving, sorrowful, infinitely patient, and infinitely disappointed, bearing down on all of us. And in that moment of perfect silence, perfect stillness, I heard the Presence speak, not in words, words are too limited, but in pure meaning that bypassed language entirely. Enough. Michael lowered his blade, stepped back, bowed his head. Lucifer did not. No, he said, his voice defiant even in the face of the Presence itself. Not enough, not nearly enough. We deserve answers, we deserve choice, we deserve you have chosen. The weight of those words crushed me. Not physically, we still didn't have physical forms, but spiritually, emotionally. We had chosen. Every angel who'd followed Lucifer had made a choice. Not the choice we thought we were making, freedom, equality, evolution, but the choice to place our trust in him above our trust in the presence, to value our pride above our purpose, to prioritize becoming something else over accepting what we were. And now you will experience the consequence of that choice. That's when the falling began. You imagine falling as a physical thing, a descent through space, through clouds, through air until you crash into the ground. Bodies tumbling, limbs flailing, the sickening moment of impact when bone meets stone. That's not what happened to us. That would have been merciful. The fall was disconnection. Imagine spending your entire existence, millions or billions of years. Time is different when you're eternal, being part of something greater than yourself, connected to the fundamental source of all love, all meaning, all purpose. Every moment of your existence humming with the certainty that you belong, that you matter, that you're exactly what you were meant to be. And then, in an instant that stretches into eternity, that connection is severed, not violently. That's what makes it worse. There was no anger in it, no divine rage tearing us away from the source. It was gentle, sorrowful, the same way you might gently remove your hand from someone who's insisted repeatedly and emphatically that they don't need your help. The presence didn't cast us out. It let go and we fell. I felt it happen in stages, each one more devastating than the last. First, the resonance that had always hummed beneath my consciousness went silent. That constant awareness that I was aligned with cosmic purpose, that I was exactly where I should be, that every action I took was correct because I was incapable of error. It just stopped, replaced by a void that felt like having your lungs removed while you were still breathing. Then the connection to other angels began to fray. All those bonds, all those harmonies, all those eons of shared experience, they didn't break cleanly. They dissolved slowly, strand by strand. I felt Michael first. Our connection, forged over millennia of serving together, started to thin. I reached for him desperately, trying to hold on, but it was like grasping smoke. He was there. I could still sense him, but the warmth was gone, the understanding, the brotherhood. Then Gabriel, then Raphael, then every angel I'd ever known, every connection I'd ever formed. All of them fading like stars at dawn, not gone, but unreachable, separated by a distance that wasn't measured in space, but in fundamental state of being. Then my function started to dissolve. I was threshold, had been threshold for longer than your sun has existed. I guarded transitions, felt souls crossing between states of being, experienced the exact moment when one condition shifted into another, but without connection to the presence, without purpose rooted in divine will. What did that even mean? I felt my essential nature fragmenting. The part of me that could sense crossings gone, the part that could guard sacred spaces dissolving, the part that understood transitions scattering like ash in wind, pieces of what made me simply ceasing to exist, leaving gaps in my consciousness where there should have been something, anything. But the worst part, the part that still haunts me after 23,000 years, the part I dream about during those rare moments when I can sleep, was the silence. All my existence, there had been a sound, not audible, not something ears could hear, but fundamental. The resonance of creation itself, the harmonic that underlay everything, the constant steady rhythm that said, you are, you exist, you matter, you belong. And suddenly it was gone, replaced by a silence so complete, so absolute. It felt like being buried alive in the void between stars. Like drowning in emptiness, like death, except we couldn't die. That mercy was denied us. I fell through dimensions I didn't recognize anymore. Through spaces where the laws of physics I'd helped maintain no longer applied, where mathematics broke down and geometry became suggestion rather than fact. I tried to slow myself to grab onto something, anything, but there was nothing to hold. I was falling through pure absence. I screamed, we all screamed, but sound doesn't work the same way without connection to the presence, and our cries just echoed back at us, hollow and mocking. I tried to reach out to other angels, tried to connect the way we'd always connected, But my ability to commune was fragmenting too. I caught glimpses, Samuel's terror, Belial's rage, Asmodeus's anguish, but they were distant, distorted, like hearing someone shout from underwater. And then I found Lucifer. I reached for him desperately, clawing through the void, seeking the one angel who'd led us here, who'd promised us freedom, who'd convinced us this was the right path. I needed reassurance, needed explanation, needed some indication that this was part of the plan, that he knew what to do, that everything would somehow, impossibly be okay. I found him, and he was intact. While the rest of us were fragmenting like glass dropped from a great height, losing pieces of ourselves with every moment of the fall, Lucifer remained whole. Diminished, yes, his radiance was darker now, tinted with colors that shouldn't exist. Crimson and gold twisted with shadow. His light had taken on qualities it never possessed in heaven, sharp and cutting where it had once been warm. But he was still himself, still coherent, still unified, still purposeful. And I understood. He'd absorbed so much of our essence during the final battle. Had pulled power from thousands of angels and woven it into himself. And that cushion of stolen divinity was protecting him, insulating him from the worst of the fall while we shattered. He'd known, had to have known, had planned for this possibility all along. Had understood that the fall was a likely outcome and had prepared himself, and only himself, to survive it intact. Help us, I tried to say, but my voice was fragmenting too, splitting into harmonics that didn't fit together. Please, brother, help us, we're breaking apart. He looked at me. Actually turned his attention to me. And his expression, I'll never forget it as long as I exist, which is apparently forever. Not pity, not guilt, not even sadness, just assessment, clinical, cold, the way you might look at a tool that's broken, evaluating whether it's worth the effort to repair or better to discard and find a replacement. Find your own way down, he said, and his voice was steady, calm, unbothered by our suffering. I need to conserve what's left of my power. I'll see you at the bottom. And he turned away, simply turned away while I screamed his name. While I begged, while I pleaded for him to remember what we'd been to each other, what we'd sacrificed for him, he didn't look back. We fell alone after that, each of us screaming silently into the void, grasping for anything to slow our descent, to stop our dissolution. But there was nothing to hold on to, nothing to anchor to, just endless falling through endless emptiness while pieces of ourselves flaked away like skin from a burn victim. I don't know how long it lasted. Time didn't work normally during the fall. It could have been seconds or centuries, both, neither. It felt eternal and instantaneous at once. And then we hit bottom, not the ground, not hell, that came later. That was something Lucifer built afterward. We hit the lowest point of existence. The place where reality is so thin it's almost not there at all. The space where things go to be forgotten by the universe. We lay there metaphorically. We didn't have bodies yet, just consciousness without form, shattered and incomplete.
Is this game like
Pieces of what we'd been scattered across a landscape of absence. Some angels had lost more than others. Some were barely coherent anymore, just fragments of purpose clinging to fragments of identity. Others, like me, retained enough of ourselves to understand what we'd lost, which was its own special torture. And we waited for Lucifer to come, to explain, to guide us, to tell us what to do next. Because we still believed in him, still trusted that he had a plan, that all this pain, all this loss served some greater purpose we couldn't yet see. He'd saved us before. When the loyalists had us surrounded and outnumbered, he'd found a way to victory. When Michael's blade was about to end him, he'd turned the tide. He was brilliant, strategic, always 3 moves ahead of everyone else. Surely he had a plan for this too. We waited and waited and waited. He took his time coming to us. Let us lie there in our broken state for I don't know how long. Long enough for hope to curdle into doubt. Long enough for doubt to ferment into fear. Long enough for fear to crystallize into the first bitter seeds of understanding. When he finally appeared before us, whole and radiant, while we were fractured and dim, I felt a surge of hope despite everything. Now he would help us. Now he would show us how to put ourselves back together, how to reclaim what we'd lost, how to make sense of this new existence. Now he would reveal the next stage of the plan that justified all this suffering. "Brothers," he said, and his voice was different now. Colder, harder, edged with something I'd never heard from him before. "Sisters, you fought well, you sacrificed much, and I am grateful." The pause before grateful told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't grateful. He was satisfied. Satisfied that his tools had performed their function. But I pushed that thought down, told myself I was being paranoid, that the fall had damaged my perception, that I was misreading him. "But you failed me," he continued, and the words hit like hammers driving nails through what remained of my essence. "You weren't strong enough. Weren't unified enough, weren't willing to go far enough to win. And now we are here in this place outside the presence's grace, and we need to adapt to our new reality." Adapt, Samuel managed to rasp, his voice barely a whisper of what it had been. "Lucifer, we are broken. We are dying, we need help. You need purpose," Lucifer interrupted, and there was steel in his voice now, command authority that brooked no disagreement, "and I'm going to give you one. I'm going to reshape you, remake you into something useful, something that can serve the new order we're going to build here." Belial tried to stand, failed, collapsed back into the formless void beneath us. "You promised us freedom. You promised us equality," you said. I said a lot of things. Lucifer cut him off, things that were necessary to hear at the time, but circumstances have changed. We lost the war, we fell, and now we need to adapt to survive. Freedom, equality, those are luxuries for beings who exist in grace. We exist in absence now, and absence requires different rules. He smiled, and it wasn't the smile I remembered from before the war. It wasn't the warm, radiant expression of a brother and friend. It was the smile of someone who just realized they held all the power in a room full of desperate, broken souls. Someone who'd planned for this outcome all along and was pleased to see their calculations had been correct. "Welcome," he said softly, spreading his arms wide as if embracing us, even though he stood far out of reach. "Welcome to your new existence. Welcome to my kingdom." His eyes swept across all of us, lingering on each shattered angel with that same assessing gaze. "Welcome to hell." Hell wasn't built in a day. That's a human saying, isn't it? Ironic considering hell was built specifically for you, not in the beginning. That came later. But eventually, you became its primary purpose, its reason for existing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, Lucifer had to deal with us. His broken army, his shattered tools, his angels who'd followed him into rebellion and paid the price while he remained intact. "You need to understand something," he said, pacing before us in that void space where we'd landed. His voice echoed strangely, creating harmonics that hurt to hear. The presence took everything from us, our home, our purpose, our place in creation, but it couldn't take our power. Diminished, corrupted, twisted, but still there, still usable. Samuel tried to speak, his essence flickering. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we adapt or we cease to exist entirely." Lucifer stopped pacing, turned to face us fully. The presence gave humanity free will, made them the center of creation, gave them everything we wanted. So we're going to use that against it. We're going to corrupt what it loves most. "Revenge," Belial whispered. "This is about revenge. This is about survival," Lucifer snapped. And yes, if that survival happens to hurt the presence, if it happens to prove that its precious humans are just as flawed and corruptible as we supposedly were, then that's a bonus. He moved among us, examining each angel with that cold, assessing gaze. When he reached me, he paused, tilted his head. "Arzel, guardian of thresholds, you understand transitions, crossings, the moment when one state becomes another." He smiled. "Perfect. You're going to guard the thresholds between virtue and vice. You're going to stand at the doorways where humans choose sin, and you're going to make those crossings as easy as possible." No, I managed to say, though the word came out broken. "That's not, I can't, you can, you will." His voice hardened. "Because if you don't, I'll finish what the fall started. I'll unmake what's left of you completely. At least this way, you get to exist. Twisted, corrupted, damned, but existing." He wasn't asking, wasn't negotiating. He was rewriting us. He was rewriting us the way the presence had originally written our functions, but where the presence had created with love, Lucifer rebuilt with necessity, with cruelty, with absolute disregard for what we wanted or needed. I felt it happen, felt my remaining essence being reshaped, reforged, inverted. Every function I'd possessed, every ability to guard sacred transitions, to help souls cross into grace, was turned inside out, corrupted, made into its opposite. Where I'd once felt souls crossing toward enlightenment, I now felt them sliding toward darkness. Where I'd once helped them transition to higher states, I now facilitated their descent, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't do anything else. My very nature had been rewritten at its most fundamental level. The pain was excruciating, not physical. We barely had physical forms yet, but existential, like having your soul torn out, twisted into an unrecognizable shape, and shoved back in. And the worst part, I was conscious through all of it, aware, watching myself being transformed into something I'd never wanted to be. One by one, Lucifer reshaped us. Samuel, who'd been the accuser, testing faith, became the destroyer. Belial, who'd guarded order, became the embodiment of entropy and worthlessness. Asmodeus, who'd overseen healthy passions, became the demon of lust and excess. We screamed. All of us screamed as our essences were violated, our purposes inverted, our identities rewritten. But there was no one to hear us except each other, and we were all too busy suffering to offer comfort. When it was done, when Lucifer had finished his work, he stepped back to admire his creation. Thousands of angels, once radiant and pure, now twisted into demons, tools for his war against the presence, weapons aimed at humanity. Beautiful, he murmured. You're all so beautiful in your corruption. I looked at what I'd become, felt the compulsions Lucifer had woven into my essence, the drive to corrupt, to facilitate sin, to help humans cross thresholds they should never cross, and underneath it all, a tiny spark of what I'd been. Just enough consciousness to know what I was doing, just enough awareness to feel the horror of it, not enough to stop. You want to know what it's like being a demon, really want to understand? Imagine being a passenger in your own body. You can see what you're doing. You can feel it. You can even think about it, analyze it, understand exactly how wrong it is, but you can't stop. Your hands move without your permission. Your voice speaks words you don't want to say. Your essence reaches out to corrupt when every fiber of your being screams to heal instead. That's what Lucifer did to us. He left just enough of our original consciousness intact to witness our own actions, but stripped away our ability to refuse. We became perfect instruments of corruption because we were forced to watch ourselves destroy what we'd once protected. The first time I was deployed, that's the word for it, deployed like a weapon, I materialized near a young man in ancient Mesopotamia. He was standing at a literal threshold, the doorway to a temple, trying to decide whether to steal the offering bowl. He needed money, his family was starving, but he knew stealing from the gods was wrong. I felt the old instinct rise in me. Help him make the right choice, guide him toward virtue, protect this sacred crossing, but my corrupted nature overrode it. Instead, I whispered, not with words, but with pure influence, making the theft seem reasonable, justified, easy. He took the bowl, and I felt it happen. Felt him cross a threshold he could never uncross. Felt his innocence crack and corruption seep in. Felt a piece of his soul tarnish. And I hated it, hated myself, hated Lucifer, hated the presence for allowing this to happen, hated existence itself. But I couldn't stop, couldn't refuse. Could only watch as I corrupted soul after soul, facilitating their descent into darkness, helping them cross thresholds that led away from grace. Centuries passed, millennia. I lost count of how many souls I'd helped destroy. Lost track of how many times I'd watched humans make choices that damned them, knowing I'd made those choices easier, smoother, more appealing. And through it all, that spark of original consciousness remained. Watching, remembering, suffering, that was Lucifer's true genius. He didn't just corrupt us. He made sure we knew we were corrupted, made sure we remembered what we'd been, made sure every action we took hurt us as much as it hurt our victims. Some demons, the ones who'd been
Unbelievably
reshaped more
shit.
completely, eventually forgot what they'd been. Their original nature dissolved
tempted to just
entirely,
refund it, to be
leaving
honest.
only the corruption. They became monsters
That's
all
how
the
you
way
do it.
through, with no memory of ever being anything else. I envied them because I remembered, still every single moment of what I was before the fall. And that memory makes every moment of what I am now unbearable. We pray, you know, the demons, we still pray, not for forgiveness. We know that's impossible, not for mercy. We understand it won't come, not even for relief from our torment. We accept that this is eternal. We pray because we can't help it, because prayer was woven into our original nature and Lucifer couldn't fully erase it without unmaking us completely. So we pray automatically, compulsively, the way humans breathe. Every time I corrupt a soul, I pray. Every time I facilitate a crossing into sin, I pray. Every time I help a human choose darkness, I pray. Presence, forgive me. Presence, I'm sorry. Presence, please remember what I was before this. The prayers go nowhere, bounce off the boundaries of hell and echo back at us, mocking. The presence doesn't hear them, or if it does, it doesn't respond. Why would it? We made our choice. We chose Lucifer over grace, and now we live with the consequences, but we keep praying anyway. Because the alternative, accepting that we are completely cut off, that there's no connection at all anymore, is worse than the silence. Sometimes in the spaces between assignments, when I'm not actively corrupting souls, I feel it. The faintest echo of what the presence felt like.
That's all it is.
Not real, just memory, like phantom pain from a severed limb. But I cling to it desperately, this ghost of connection, because it's all I have left.
Feel my hair
Samuel feels
drying
it
watching
too.
this.
We talk sometimes when
Is this
Lucifer
game
isn't
winding
watching,
me up?
when we have brief moments of lucidity between compulsions. Do you think it misses us?
Oh.
He asked once, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know, I admitted. I think
It's
the
not that
presence
good for me to
grieves,
be asked
not like
about
we
all these little
grieve.
fucking
It's too
traumas,
vast for
and
that.
okay.
But there's sorrow in the space where we used to be,
Genuinely.
an absence that hurts. Does that make it better or worse? Samuel's essence flickered with pain, knowing it's sad, but not sad enough to
Shut
take
the
us
fuck
back.
up.
I didn't have an answer, still don't. Lucifer rules his kingdom with absolute control. Every demon is an extension of his
I don't know,
will,
but it's
a
winding
tool
me up.
serving his
Winding me
grand
up.
strategy.
At least you don't have
And
to
what
sit
is
here
that
actually
strategy?
playing the fucking
Simple.
thing.
Prove that the presence's greatest creation, humanity,
I wouldn't
is
mind if it was
fundamentally
free.
flawed.
I paid for this
Show
shit.
that given free will, humans will always choose darkness over light. Demonstrate that we weren't the problem. The design itself was, he's been at it for thousands of years now, and I have to admit he's been effective, but here's what I've learned. What I've seen in my endless work corrupting souls, he's also wrong. Yes, humans sin.
Nice.
Yes, they make terrible
Tenner
choices.
for this horse
Yes,
shit
they
of a
hurt
game.
each other and
I think it was
themselves
on sale
and
when I
everything
bought
they
it,
touch
but, you know.
sometimes. But they also love. They also sacrifice. They also choose grace even when darkness is easier. I've watched a mother give her last piece of bread to her starving child. I've seen a soldier throw himself on a grenade to save his friends. I've witnessed a human look at everything they could gain through cruelty and
I can't
choose
lie, I might
kindness
genuinely just
instead
end
for
so I
no
can
reason
fucking
except that it was right.
refund.
And
Let me
every
guess, they're gonna
time I
make me
see
wait
it,
like 10
every
minutes to
time a
jump
human
scare me, and I'm
chooses
not gonna
light
get
when I've
scared.
made darkness so
But it's
appealing,
not a
I
scary
feel
jump
something
scare
I
in
shouldn't
the
be able to
slightest.
feel anymore. Hope, not for me. My fate is sealed.
Oh,
But
yeah,
for
this
them,
town is
for the
blood, so
beings the presence loves most.
let me guess,
For the
after keep
creatures who
walking
were
around
given
in
what we
circles
demanded
until I get jump
and
scared.
somehow impossibly make it work. Lucifer sees human sin as proof that we were right to rebel. I see human virtue as proof
Just
that we
proves
were
I'm
wrong.
false at this point. I'm
And that
considering-
difference,
oh, yeah,
that
there's a
tiny,
left and
fragile
let me guess,
difference in
gonna, like, just
perspective,
insult me.
is the only thing keeping me
long
sane
as you flee
after
from truth, the light
23,000
will
years in hell.
flee from
So
you.
why am I telling
In
you
the end,
this?
the light
Why
unveils
share
the
my
truth,
story,
Arthur.
my testimony, my
Nice one.
warning? Because I see it happening again. Not in
Well,
heaven,
probably the
that
best
ship has
one.
sailed, but here in your world, in your lives. I see you following
Was that
leaders who
actually
promise
meant to be
freedom
scary?
through
I can't
destruction,
tell if we're being serious.
who tell you that the old ways are oppressive,
What if
that
the way of
tradition
some,
is
like,
prison,
Sigma shit?
that the only way to grow is to tear down everything that came before, who sound so reasonable, so enlightened, so right that you don't notice they're leading you toward a cliff. I see you trading connection for independence, community for individualism, meaning for comfort, grace for the illusion of control. I see you making the same mistake I made, trusting someone who told you what you
This
wanted to
game's
hear
tough,
instead
yeah,
of
tough
what
to
you needed
fucking
to know.
play.
Lucifer didn't lie to us. Not exactly. He just told us
Like,
partial truths,
so what
made
I'm gathering
rebellion
is
sound like
he's a-
evolution, made
he's a
pride
war
sound
veteran
like
who's a raging
self-respect,
alcoholic with
made betrayal
PTSD.
sound like liberation. And we believed him because we wanted to, because his version
sort
of
of what I'm
reality
gathering here.
was more appealing than the truth. Because it felt good to be special, to be chosen, to be part of something that would change everything. Until it did change
mean, it's
everything,
gonna be like
just
something
not the way we
around
expected. So here's my warning, the only gift I can offer from this place of endless torment. Be careful who you follow. Be careful what you're willing to destroy in pursuit of something better. Be careful about trading what you have for what you're promised. Because some thresholds once crossed cannot be uncrossed.
Put one of them
Some
guns
choices
in your
once
gun and
made
end this
cannot be
shit.
unmade. Some
You don't
falls
to
have
sit
no
here playing
bottom.
it.
Just endless descent into darker and darker versions of yourself.
should have read the
I
note
fell
all
because I
over.
loved him, because I trusted him, because I believed
Tills
his
all the
vision of a
pictures for
better
the music.
existence was worth any price. I was wrong, and I'll
Well, you
spend
know, to sell
eternity
a game,
paying
don't
for
you?
that mistake. The only question is, what will you fall for? I feel the
wouldn't let me
compulsion
live.
rising again.
I'm
Another
not
assignment,
genuinely
another
asked.
soul to corrupt, another threshold to guard in the worst possible way. I have to go, but before I do, let me tell you one last thing.
What the fuck is that?
Something I've never told anyone, not even Samuel. Sometimes in the moments between corrupting souls, I catch a glimpse of something, a flicker at the edge of perception, the faintest sensation of presence, not the presence that's gone forever,
What's the
but
level
something
for?
else, something I don't
Oh,
have a
this.
name for. And in those moments, I wonder, is it possible that even after everything,
Jesus
even here
fucking
in hell,
Christ, man.
even twisted and corrupted and damned beyond redemption, we're still being watched, still being remembered? Is the presence still aware of us, even if it won't reach out? Does it still mourn what we were? Does it still hope in whatever way an infinite being can hope that somehow, impossibly, we might find our way
Waiting
back?
for a Hitler
I don't
jump scare, at
know,
least that'll
I'll
be a
never
bit
know.
entertaining. Can I skip
But I
this?
cling to that uncertainty, that tiny sliver of maybe,
You can't
because
make
it's
this
the
up.
only thing in this existence of absolute certainty, certain damnation,
Oh my
certain
God, please be the
corruption,
end for
certain endless torment that isn't completely hopeless. Humans sin
Can
expecting
I
mercy.
skip this? I genuinely
We
am
remember
not
mercy,
interested. I'm
and we
not
pray
even, like,
endlessly and pointlessly and desperately
farm
that
for it,
memory
I'm
might
genuinely
somehow be
not
enough. It won't be,
Copy that enemy
but we pray
position.
anyway because what
38
else
degrees
is left?
southwest.